So, this is going to be chaos theory. I might as well. Like I said, I was going to, and I haven't thought this fully through, but chaos theory is a very important aspect of reality. It's foundational. It is part of my philosophy of the universe because it is interesting. Um, I'm not going to talk about the history of chaos theory because I think that's been talked about, and if you want the history of it, you can find that elsewhere. I'm for much more abstract, meaningful interpretations of what it's about. So we're going to start with a d6. So a d6 is a cube, and each side of the cube has a different number. And so it's called a d6 because there's six sides. And the d stands for die, or dice. Um, and so you take this and you roll it across the table. Now, conventional wisdom, before the 1950s, so this is very current. This is very like a modern way of looking at things. But so conventional wisdom before the 1950s, the previous 22,000 years of life where anything had any remote chance of thinking thoughts, it was that you would be able to know enough to be able to know what the die is going to come up. You throw the die, and if you know enough, you'll know what it comes up. If you knew, so you're in a closed room, right? You imagine a room, it's enclosed, it's sealed, and you know the entire structural makeup of the die. You know the history of the structural makeup of the die. You know the structural nature of the table, the history of it, the interaction forces between the table and the die. You know about the air, the history of the air, whether or not the air has ever experienced Febreze. Every single thing that's ever happened to the air, to the person holding the die, their entire life history, their entire psychological makeup, everything that they are as a human being. You know everything about the universe. You measure it to the most minute detail. Everything is known. You throw the die. If you throw the die, so you throw the die, right, off the table. The idea is, the conventional wisdom is you'll be able to know what it comes up, what the result is, what it will say on top of it. Chaos theory, which is, the word theory is a misnomer in the sense that it's pretty well proven in a way. We know that what's happening is some part this. This is what's happening. And this is also my interpretation of chaos theory. This is Goose's chaos theory. So Goose's chaos theory is, you know all of the things, right? If you throw that die with enough force that it really rolls across the table, it hits, the corner of the table and it bounces back. If you throw that die with enough force, you can't know what it comes up as. There is no amount of information that you can know about the initial condition to be able to know what the result will be. This is what chaos theory is about. That the amount of information that there is going to be once the die comes up is greater than the amount of information that existed before you threw the die. There's no way around it. Like, this is a thing that happens. This is a thing that we can see the evidence of. It's very, very small. But we're going to get to the next part about that. Now, there is, I don't know, there's probably people who are already arguing with me. But this is what chaos theory is about. This is that if there is enough force in the die, there is no amount of information that we can have to know what result the die will come up as. That is what it is. And I have to find my train of thought. Excuse me for 1 second. So the idea is that there's more information. The amount of information that exists is constantly increasing. And the first iteration of chaos theory was about how something insanely small, i.e., this is the program where it was first found, something insanely small, 0.000 something of a percent, being different changes the nature of complex systems. My assertion is that that amount of difference, that amount of uncertainty, that amount of change is inherent to existence. That is inherent in life itself. Everything you will ever do and have in the universe is going to have a little of error. We do have physical evidence for this in the Heisenberg uncertainty principle and the double slit experiment and the other part of the Heisenberg uncertainty. Isn't there two parts to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle? So you can't measure something within a certain amount of accuracy. It cannot be measured below a certain amount, because with the, my previous explanation about the universe, it doesn't exist in that small of a materia. It doesn't exist in that distinctly finite of a way. And you can measure the location of item, or you can measure its direction, which means you can't know both. You're always going to have a question mark about the finite, tiniest bit of reality. There's always a question mark. And there's an amount to which you can measure that is, you can't measure any more specifically, because the specifics don't exist at that small of a distance. You have the act of trying to measure things change what the measurements are. You have that things behave differently where there is nothing measuring how they're going to behave versus whether we're trying to measure them and pay attention to them. So this is to say that there is no way that we could possibly measure everything in reality as it stands. And so my assertion is that even if you could, it still would have this behavior, partly because we can't measure everything. We cannot possibly know all of the different things that exist in all of its different minute ways. That's not part of how the universe exists. And so these tiny different changes, these tiny things, they affect more and more and more and more and more, and they build out. So weather, the reason why we can't predict weather is because the amount of error that you have about today's weather, like the amount of error that you have about the weather right now, can be pretty small. We can have a pretty firm understanding of what the weather is right now, obviously. But then the amount of information that we can have to predict the weather in an hour, well, that's bigger. And then in a day, that's big. Then in 3 days, we're getting pretty substantial amounts of uncertainty about what the nature of weather is going to be, because we cannot know enough about the world to be able to predict perfectly what the weather is going to be in 3 days. It's too complex of a system. Every small thing interacts with every other small thing in compounding ways, building up to these bigger things. And this comes back to the idea of that there is more information after the die has been rolled than before the die was rolled. That information increase in the universe is small because it's a small thing. It's a small number. It's a small roll. But this builds and builds, and there's more information, and there's more information, and that information that there's more of generates its new more information. So you have a triangle on a piece of paper. You put a dot on the piece of paper. You roll the die. You then draw a line in between the dot that you previously drew and one of the sides or the corner, depending on the number that you rolled, halfway between the two. And then you roll the die again, and again, and again, and again. Dot, 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 dot. This information, you now have more information. You have more information. You have more information. This expanding, growing thing makes a fractal triforce. So the triforce is a triangle within a triangle, right? So 3 triangles within one triangle. But what you make, if you make an infinite number of dots, is you have basically a triforce that then when you look at the one of the three triangles, within that triangle are three triangles, that within those triangles are three triangles, that within those are three, and then those, and the triangles and triangles and triangles and triangles and triangles. You just have an infinite number of triangles inside an infinite number of triangles. This is what happens when you have enough information, is you have a pattern, right? You have this new ordered piece of information. And then if this ordered piece of information is complex enough, if instead of triangles, it was something with more sides, say it was 6-sided, the shapes themselves, well, if it was 7-sided, if it was a 7-sided object that you did the same thing with, which how you would do that, we're not going to question in the moment, but the shapes would be constantly different, and they would make this new complex pattern that doesn't perfectly repeat, that isn't a triangle, it's something different. And so the more complex that you build it, the more chaotic seeming the resulting pattern will be, and the more complex that pattern will be. And then as that gets bigger, it will have its own inherent bit of chaos, this own inherent bit of uncertainty. And so this is what we see with weather, is that weather is a reaction, it's a law, it's an ordered event happening as a result of small chaotic events that are so small that they propagate through this ordered event to make a pattern that is rain, that creates a new resultant shape. It's really hard to think about and imagine. But the idea is we start with a point. That point becomes a number. That number becomes a shape. That shape becomes a story, and that because of the shapes within shapes, and then that story becomes motion. And then that motion becomes this new living thing that has its own story to it. And it's constant growth of expanding. So every essentially chaos theory leads into a lot of things, but it's every interaction with electrons in life and thought every single day creates the smallest, tiniest bit of new information that didn't exist before. The smallest, tiniest new thing is made. And then the smallest, tiniest way, the universe, has to expand to fit it. And as life gets more complex, as we get more interactions, more people are rolling more dice every day. We get more and more information, more and more thoughts, more and more unique new things. The universe grows faster and faster. So my opinion, my belief, is that if you want to be good, if you want to make a moral universe, it's with having interactions, conversations, stories, art. You make something, and then people interact with that something, and they make things based upon that something. This expanding outward series of events, of new things making new things, making new things. This is life. This is how life came to be, and this is where life is going to go. So, I guess circle back and wonder if maybe this should have been part of the other video or not. I do not know. This is my mathematical idea of morality, is this constantly expanding spiral flow of life, thought, ideas, information, stories, art, meaning, emotion, these things that we are able to manifest because we are alive, and we are alive because the universe manifested us in the exact same way. The same way that we write stories is the way the universe made us. It's this continuing pattern circling back on itself as it grows and expands. This is what is good. This is what is meaningful. This is what makes life. This is what makes life good. This is how you be good, is you promote this. You promote interacting with each other, communicating with each other, open communications, honest communications, fictional communications. Every form of way that you can interact with other people and connect is good. The obvious exception to that being when the interaction is one in which where you stop them from interacting with other people. Like, for example, a narcissist who stops you from talking to your friends because they want to be the only person you talk to, that's not good, because his interaction is reducing your interactions in a day. That's not good. And you can use this philosophy to look at everything. Every, problem can be filtered through this. There will be, I can think of one niche scenario where it becomes complicated and it doesn't line up super easily, but the idea is, if it's just about you promoting the freedom of life to be expressed and be heard and to be alive in every one of its forms. Immigrants want to move. That in itself is an interaction that should be promoted. They want to change locations, live in a new country. That should be promoted. People want to change how they are perceived by society. That should be promoted. A changing perspective on how society views people and interacts with them is healthy and good. People, want to be able to afford to be alive. That's one of those smaller ones where it's like, yeah, no, that's clearly good. There is a philosophy that exists that says, as best as I can tell, that you need negative things to make good things. And that's not true. That's not true at all. I don't believe that for a second. I believe that there are some times where good things seem like or feel like bad things. I'll give you an example. I never was shown compassion. I just wasn't. That's not a thing I was shown. So the first time ever in my life that I was shown it, it hurt. It was like being set on fire. So in a way, it seemed like it was, negative thing, because it pained me. It caused me difficulty. But that's just because it was different. It's not what I knew. It's not what I was used to. But it was still very much a good thing. Compassion is a good thing. And being set on fire is good because fire is life. Obviously, I'm talking about metaphorical fire. Don't actually pour gasoline on people, please, ever. But you will have these times where being given what is healthy for you will seem like it's a bad thing, or scary, or painful. Just because you're not used to it. Just because you've never experienced it before. So, Elon Musk never knew what it felt like to be in an environment where he was taken, supported, given warmth, given equal care, being part of a community, being equals to people. He wasn't shown that. He wasn't shown family. He wasn't shown compassion. He was shown slaves, and he was shown that his dad did not care for him. If he was given an environment that he should have had, the environment where you are just part of a community of people where no one is above anyone else, and you have no expectations on you and who you are and how you act or behave, to be accepted, to be allowed to be here, that would feel like punishment to him. It would feel horrible to him. It would feel like, that he was in jail. He was imprisoned. But the thing is, it would be healthy for him. It would be beneficial to him. It would be good for him. So I advise that we give him what he should have and deserve. I hope all of that made sense. I really rarely ever do make sense.